and welcome to the Brooks Breakthrough Podcast. I am your host, Ashley Brooks. Today, my guest is Jeff Howard, a co-founder of Vika Living, a company building modern homes in a lightweight, transportable package. Think tiny homes, but for Airbnb. He's going to be sharing his experience as an entrepreneur, what it's looked like to build his company with his team, and how Vika Living is partnering with investors to provide unique experiences for travelers all over the world. So without further ado, Jeff, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much for doing this, and thanks for the great intro.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I've been watching your company for a little bit. I know we've connected a few months ago. I love what you guys are doing, so I'm so excited for you to get to share that today.
Thanks.
Now, before we jump into the business and entrepreneur life, share a little bit of your background. Where are you from? What led you into this industry?
Sure. So I am a Texas guy. I was born and raised in the Dallas area, and up until about 5.5 years ago, that's where we lived. And then my family and I relocated to Charleston, South Carolina, which is where I'm at now. Vika Living, our HQ and factory, is just outside of Los Angeles. I work remotely most of the time, but yeah, originally from Texas and wound up in South Carolina.
Got it. And so when you were in high school and college, did you ever think that this would be your life, that you would be an entrepreneur or even start a business? I know most kids don't even think about that. My daughter's gonna have career day here in a few weeks. And so we were like, can we send her as an entrepreneur? Like, what does that look like?
Right.
A t-shirt? Yeah. So tell me what that was like for you when you were in high school and college.
Yeah, I mean, high school and college, did I ever think that I would own my own business? I'm not sure, but I certainly hadn't ruled it out. And I think in large because there are several entrepreneurs within my family and at, various levels and in different, differing fields. I had grandparents who on one side of my family who had started their own business and stuck with it, all the way until retirement. And so I certainly grew up with that example. Other set of grandparents who retired from being educators and coaches and things like that, and then became cattle ranchers when I was very, very young. And so that's, their own business, but on a completely different scale. And then my own parents started their own business at, I was probably in junior high, I think, when they started their business. And so I got to see it and work there in its earliest days. So my first like real world job, outside of like mowing yards and things like that, was actually working for my parents' company. And I still to this day have my first business card, which one of their people made for me. And I was called Fax Man. Okay. So this is before email was huge and, video chats and all this stuff. It was fax machines were, predominant in how everyone communicated. So at that age of, however old you are when you're in about seventh grade or so, that was my first job. And watching that firsthand of seeing a company go from literally a fold out card table and a phone to what became, several hundred employees, locations around the world, things like that, and being a part of that in some sense every step of the way. So in those high school and college years, I think there was always part of me that had a certain level of confidence that if I do decide to start my own business, I've had great examples in my life to give me the faith and energy and, all the things needed to tackle it. But I didn't actually decide to do it until after college.
Got it. What kind of business did your parents have?
It's a corporate relocation company, which was kind of my intro on a large scale into a very different real estate world. So my mom was a real estate agent when I was, a baby and growing up. And I used to go with her to some of her listings and things like that. And she'd pay me a quarter to go around the house and like check certain rooms and do stuff. So maybe that was my first job. So I kind of grew up with real estate on the retail side and then into corporate relocation, which is a whole different ballgame, but dealing with real estate contracts, sales and acquisitions all around the country and then globally, that gives you a unique perspective.
Oh, certainly. And so you speak the language really well then when it
Sure.
comes into real estate. And so it's kind of meshed into Vika Living pretty well.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey to get from all of those experiences to then working for a stint with a investment firm that was dealing with like bulk real estate transactions off the market, selling chunks of, investors' portfolios from one group to another, things like that. So I was essentially the person that would broker those deals, manage it from start to finish. That gave me another really interesting education, on that side of things. Then that led to me starting another one of my companies that I ran for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years or so, where it was primarily focused on real estate investment, development, brokering deals in some cases, sponsoring deals in other cases. That was really interesting. And then all of that, cumulative experience on my side of the equation, because I'm co-founder of Vika Living, has given me a lot of confidence in launching that company, understanding the real estate market from so many different angles. And then my co-founder, thank God, is a brilliant engineer. And so he was able to take his cumulative experiences on the housing side of things. And both of us kind of came together and had a wish list of things that we wanted to see and wanted to accomplish. And they aligned perfectly. We worked really well together. And that was the start of Vika.
So tell us about the company. What are you guys doing? What are you building? Obviously, I know a lot about the company, but for anyone who's never heard of you, share a little bit about the company.
Yeah, so Vika Living, what we're building are rapidly deployable and relocatable, lodging or housing units. So like Ashley had mentioned earlier, we were talking about, like the Airbnb model, for example. So our earliest customers are people on the glamping side, hoteliers, boutique hospitality, things like that, but certainly large scale Airbnb style operations, people that are buying, say, 6 or more units and renting them out on a nightly basis. What we saw several years ago was glamping industry and the tiny home movement. All of these things have been growing year over year for the last decade or so. It's now a multi-billion-dollar industry within the US. It's huge in Europe, huge in Australia, and it's growing across the world. So this isn't just a pandemic flash. This has been in the works for a while. But what we noticed was, and this, a few stops in our career, Scott and I, my co-founder, was that most of these companies were doing one of two things. They were either using canvas top, so a soft top, which that can be problematic because you're only going to use that in certain climates or at certain times of the year. Like where I'm at in Charleston, that's kind of hard to use one because that thing's going to mold pretty quickly with the humidity levels that we have here. Similar to Houston in your area, the high humidity and things like that. It's hard to use a canvas top structure. And then the other side of things that most builders are doing are more of a permanent structure. So your typical, tiny home, which is easily 6 figures in cost and up, you have to have a foundation. You have to have certain things done. You have to have permits just to bring the thing in, and then cranes and heavy machinery and things like that to get them going. So what we built was a unit that can be transported. They literally fold in for transport. So I can put 6 of these things on a truck and get them shipped anywhere, or in a shipping container if it's ocean freight. Then we roll them off the truck or out of the unit, get them to the site where they need to be, and they unfold in less than an hour, and you're set up and ready for use. So they include the furniture. This was kind of our wish list, our checklist of things we wanted to accomplish. We knew that we needed to have them mobile because people need to be able to move them around for a number of different reasons. So check that off the box. But we needed a hard top. Got that. We needed a great look, just a really clean, really attractive design on it. And I think we did that very, very well. That's unanimous feedback that we've received. Everyone loves how this thing looks. But it needs a bed, it needs a kitchen, table, it needs a shower and a restroom and an HVAC and all of these components. So we accomplished all of that and then took it a step further and created the ability to actually have it go completely off grid if people want. So you don't have to plug into infrastructure. You can if you want to, but if you need to be off grid, then we can configure it that way. And people are really taking advantage of that in some spectacular locations.
Like that. I bet. Now, I know one of the last times I spoke to you earlier in the year, I think it was in the spring, there were orders that had already been placed, but no one had actually received any yet. Have you delivered any so far?
We're a couple of weeks away.
Okay.
So that's a great question. Yeah. That we're so excited. This is a really fun, exciting time for us right now because we have our first full-scale prototype built and done. It's amazing. The only thing we're doing to it right now is just some minor tweaks, here and there, but structurally, cosmetically, everything has just exceeded expectations, most of the time. And now we've got people coming into our factory for tours, checking it off. We're taking on more contracts. So yeah, it's an exciting time for us. By the end of the summer, we'll have our first units delivered in California and then spreading out from there.
Oh, wow. And I didn't know that you included the furniture, which is a really nice touch because so right now
Yeah,
I have hotel owners who are getting into Airbnb, but they're buying homes. And so they're having to go in and completely refresh everything, buy new
right.
furniture, all of that kind of stuff. So the fact that you take that off the list for someone is a really, really good touch.
Yeah, even our base model is going to include all of the furniture. Now, we also have an additional option where we can take it a step further and have it truly be turnkey, where for just a little bit more, you can include everything from the linens, the towels, dishes,
Oh,
coffee
wow.
maker, wine opener. I mean, you name it, like just completely turnkey, ready for operation like the same day that you receive it. So that's available also.
What is the starting price so that people know?
So these range depending on how they're configured from 35,000 to 46,000. The upper end is going to be if you need to go off grid, it's just more expensive to have the solar panels and the batteries with that and all of those various components. But that price range was really important for us because it kind of puts us in a sweet spot in the middle on that wide spectrum of glamping, lodging, tiny homes, things like that. Those tiny homes are 100,000 plus. Airstream trailers are now so expensive and hard to get. And then even the super luxury canvas tents can get into the upper 20s and even low 30s on pricing. So where we've positioned ourselves, I think works very, very well.
Absolutely. So I know that obviously, Hope, you mentioned there are a number of investors who were getting on with this. We actually saw an RV park on the north side of Houston that has like 5 different ways to stay there. So
Sure.
it's tiny homes. They even have it's like wagons that have been made into little
Yeah.
rooms. It's been really interesting. Have you seen any businesses like that approach you?
Yeah, that's a great point. That is a trend that is happening nationwide. So people, whether it's an RV park or like your, traditional KOA style, campgrounds, things like that, that have been around for decades that people are accustomed to. Operators across the board are all looking for new ways to accommodate guests who now have higher expectations and different needs. And so even like the traditional campground sites are trying to incorporate different styles of lodging. That's the most popular thing for all the operators right now. And they need to be able to accommodate that because it helps their bottom line. It increases their booking. And those who have upgraded, their lodging for these things are seeing an uptick in revenue month over month. They're seeing an increase in booking. And we've got a pretty large sample size of operators that we're speaking to across the country that have reinforced that. We kind of expected that to be the case, but that is certainly something that is no longer a trend. It's the new norm for that industry.
Oh, definitely. And so my husband and I, we follow Bigger Pockets a lot. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of real estate investors on there. And I know over the last few years, one of the things they push a lot is RV parks. You have more and more investors going that route as well. So it's been interesting, not just to see the popularity that's grown as far as consumers, but how many investors want to get into that game now.
Yeah. Yeah, I just had a conversation last week with an investor who is buying as many campgrounds and RV parks as they can, primarily like, in a particular region of the country that they're very interested in. But they had done a really extensive research project leading up to it to kind of reinforce their theory of why they wanted to invest that way. And not only was it showing that if you have additional lodging options outside of just the pad for the RV unit, but it actually helps their bookings across the board. So if you have something like a Vika on your property and you're renting that out on a nightly basis, your booking percentage, your nightly occupancy ratio goes up for everything else across the board. So it was helping all of their business lines by introducing new lodging options.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's great to see the benefit just across the board, like you said, and not just
Yeah.
in one particular type of unit. So I know that the majority of your business is investors, But have you had any, let's say, couples or even
Oh yeah.
single people come to you and say, "Hey, I want this tiny home lifestyle." Have you had any of those orders come in that are going to use them for personal use?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I
Mm.
just had a call yesterday with somebody who they essentially want to buy 5 to 10 acres. They're going to have like a small, kind of standard single family home on the property, but then they want to all around the property have, lodging like Vikas, things like that for guests and family and things like that, and just have it as, a permanent part of their land. We've had, even from the beginning when this was still conceptual, we had investors who were investing in us say, well, I want to have one of these in my backyard. This is going to be my mother-in-law suite or my guest quarters. We've had, golf courses say, hey, this would be great to kind of sprinkle around the golf courses as, guest lodging and things like that. We've had a wide variety of kind of use cases, so to speak, come our way. But the other side of it is, and I didn't mention this, because you're right, it's a lot of corporations, investors, things like that that are kind of doing this on a larger scale. That would be kind of our primary lane of business. But the other side is we are doing this on the humanitarian side of things, so working with nonprofit organizations. So think, homelessness focused, trafficking survivors, things like that, or even disaster relief. So we're already in the process of working with a number of organizations to have these similar type units, with a great look, luxury, comfort, all these things, but be able to help people out when they're in the most critical points of their lives. And so we're focusing on both of those, and that's been an extraordinary journey for us. And it's a lot of fun to be able to work with great business people, but then also have impact and do a lot of good at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. And that, I mean, as you can imagine, especially, I mean, during the times of relief when hotels get flooded
Yeah,
and you just have people packed into these rooms, um,
right.
it provides great relief,
Yeah.
just for families for sure.
I do a lot of consulting work outside of Vika Living, and several of my clients are in the nonprofit world, and a few of those are in the anti-trafficking space. And so I'm very well aware of kind of what the roadblocks and obstacles are and things like that. And so, that's another area that I'm very passionate in. Scott, my co-founder, also definitely has a heart to help people and really step in and serve when needed. So we're grateful that we're in a position where we can be a for-profit business, go after the things that we want to on that side of things, but then also elevate things for people in dire need.
Mm, that's awesome. So I know that you guys are both on opposite sides of the country. How
Yeah.
are there any struggles with that of like not being able to be at the HQ or with your co-founder? What is that process like?
It's a good question. I think the biggest struggle is, I'm jealous that he's there every day and gets like we started off with the idea for Vika. We started off with, then some drawings and then renderings and things like that. And for me not to physically be there and, see the foundation of it and then walk into it and see all the things and touch and feel on a regular basis, that's really the biggest challenge. But we do, as far as the work itself goes, we've got a really good flow. And I think a lot of people around the country are so accustomed now to working remotely. I started working remotely prior to the pandemic a few years before. So I've had my rhythm with this for a while. But what you have to do is, like for Scott and I, we have a standing call every morning, video call. And that way we can see each other. I can see the stuff in the factory, and we can go over that. And that's a standing call. And sometimes we talk 2, 3 times a day. And then, there's Slack throughout the day and things like that. So we have constant communication, and that's critical. So if you are going to work remotely, as co-founders and things like that, or even just in a team in general, you have to establish patterns and
Mm,
habits and things like that, and expectations have to be clear. That way you can eliminate frustrations. But yeah, it's the biggest challenge is just more on a personal thing. I would love to be able to actually physically be in the unit every day and do calls like this from the unit. So I'm going to bring one out to my house and start doing that.
are you really, or is that a joke?
No, we're really going to do that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we're going, and my kids are thrilled. My wife's like, we're all like, yay, that's going to be cool. We've got a spot in the backyard for it. And then I'll set it up as kind of an extension of my home office.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, how often do you actually go visit the office?
Coming up, it's going to get a little bit more regular. So there's going to be a stretch here probably for the rest of the year where it'll be about once a month. Because we have a lot of things going on, which is all fun and good stuff. So we've got great customers that are coming in that I want to meet in person. I've had nothing but phone calls and video calls with them during this time. It'll be great to shake hands, go out to dinner, things like that. Just meet in person, and then delivering our first units. Those milestones got to be there for that.
Yeah.
And then we have a big photo shoot and video shoot that's coming up with several locations out in California, and that'll be a lot of fun. So yeah, there'll be need for me to travel quite a bit in the next, say 6 months.
They're all very exciting. Well, so walk us through the process of what it would look like to actually purchase one or multiple units. What does that look like from start of like inquiry when someone reaches out to you to the time of delivery?
Yeah, good question. Because since we haven't started our marketing campaign yet, everything that we have done so far and doing today has all just been kind of part of our warm network, which thankfully has been a fantastic network of people to work with. And the process is pretty simple. You can reach out via our website, fill out a quick, inquiry. You can reach out to me directly. I'm completely fine with that. Love talking to people and getting to know new people, and really enjoy hearing about, the plans, where are you going to put these things? What kind of business are you going to be doing? That's a lot of fun for me. So people can reach out and just start with a simple conversation, understanding, what are your needs, answering every question about Vika, what we're building, the functionality of it, the features, all of those things, just making sure that you get all the information you need. And then people are welcome to schedule factory tours if they want. If we don't have a unit in their area and they're willing to come out to Los Angeles, we can even put them up for the night, have them tour the factory. They can stay in a Vika on location somewhere. We can do a number of things to accommodate, which we're doing for people now. And then if they decide to go ahead and proceed with their order, simple process. We're just doing 50% deposit up front upon execution of that agreement, and then the balance is due upon delivery. People can pay cash, they can finance. We've got a couple of finance options that we're setting up. I will say in these next several months, most of our orders are going to be restricted to 6 units plus, just for logistical efficiency. And not to say that we won't do a single order or a double order, things like that, but we have to take into account just shipping a single unit from Los Angeles to New York, for example. That's a costly shipping cost, and doesn't make the best use of everyone's time versus me putting 6 units on a truck delivering them to a location. So we're starting off that way. As we grow and then have operations in other parts of the country, it'll be a lot easier for us and cost effective to go ahead and deliver out single units one at a time.
No, that makes sense. So I know you shared a little bit about what investors or what consumers are planning to do with the units, but are there any wild stories you could share or something that's been extremely unique or interesting to hear?
Well, let's see. Yeah, I told you about the golf courses, the backyard units, all of that stuff. That's kind of commonplace right now. you know, I can't divulge this in such a public forum, but I will say I'm thrilled with some of the people that we're working with right now and the vision they have for these operations that they're setting up, like in some really cool locations, having the Vikas. But it's not just that, it's the amenities and the things that they're adding around the units themselves. I can't wait to share that, with the world and promote these guys, because that'll be a really fun thing to do. We've had groups reach out to us for employee housing, which actually was not something that we had anticipated when we started this, but we're getting hit with that a lot now. And so that was probably the biggest surprise so far as use case. But providing lodging for whether it's temporary or even for like 6-9 month stretches, things like that, employee housing, that's a huge need for a lot of industries. And I mean, I've had probably a dozen meetings just on that.
I know you can't share a lot, but if you had any from healthcare, because you have traveling nurses that
I
usually work
know.
13 weeks at a time.
Just recently, we were brought into a conversation regarding a hospital system in Montana. and their desperate need for lodging for not only their own staff, but family members visiting people in the hospitals, because some of these hospitals are located in areas where there are no hotels or, Airbnb to rent or anything within a reasonable drive. And we're finding that more and more. So yeah, we're happy to step in and accommodate and do all of those things. But it's just an interesting part of this journey because it's not something we had planned for, but it makes a lot of sense.
Oh, certainly. And it's interesting because I think even here, Houston, we have the medical center, which is massive. A lot of people come to our campus. There's
Yeah.
not a lot of open land where you could put this, but man, if there was, I had a cousin years ago who unfortunately passed away from leukemia. But and at that time, I was working in hotels. I was constantly giving the family hotel discounts and trying to get them in at places because it would just be a rush. Even though
Yeah.
every week he was going, sometimes it would be like we have to go to the hospital, and you don't know how long you're going to be there. Um,
Yeah.
and it adds up for
Yeah,
sure.
it's a strain for anyone that has to deal with that, for the hospital system themselves. I mean, we're learning a lot about that. And it's even the hospitality industry in general. Like, we're dealing with several hotels in, let's just say, they have peak tourist seasons. And, during those peak tourist seasons, they have to bring in, 80% more as far as their workforce. And with what's happened in real estate in general, across the nation, their typical lodging options are no longer available. And so they're just desperate for anything, to the point where some, institutions are building their own apartment complexes because they just can't put their people anywhere. So yeah, we're not able to help everyone, but for those where it makes sense, I think you'll see the Vika units used for a number of different reasons now. But as far as locations, I will say this: we've had a conversation with a group that is interested in putting units in the Arctic. So
Interesting.
from that end of the spectrum to we've already got a deal with a group out of Guatemala, in a really cool area in Guatemala. We've got Mexico. We've got a group in Australia that we're in conversations with that has a really cool glamping operation, and they do some unique, adventures and things like that. Yeah, it's kind of sky's the limit, really. We're planning on shipping internationally next year and getting to that. So I think we'll see some extraordinary locales just outside of the U.S. even.
Oh, absolutely. I hope you get to visit as many of those locations as
I
you
know.
just to,
Yeah,
one, just to see what people create.
yeah,
You and your team created these amazing units, and then you get to go and see what the environment that your investors create. I think that's a really cool experience.
yeah. Some of these we've already kind of earmarked of, okay, we're going to have to do a staff trip out here and do a photo shoot at this location, things like that, and essentially give ourselves a nice little vacation spot. Yeah, there's places we definitely have already made a list that we plan on going.
Well, I want to transition into entrepreneurial life. So
Yeah.
I know you shared growing up with parents who owned a business, you kind of got to see what it looked like. But so you haven't been a business owner all of your life. So
No.
what was it like transitioning?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It is, for me anyway, at the very beginning, it can be simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. Which, for people who haven't experienced it, that may just not make sense. But I love the challenge of it. I love the I love the opportunity of it, to be able to step into something from the very beginning and speak into it in areas that make sense from my background and expertise. And I love building things. I love starting something from the ground up. But even more than that, I love working with a dedicated team that has the same level of passion for what we're doing and confidence in what we're doing, and seeing that come together. And so, I've had startup companies that did okay and then kind of, puttered out after a while. And then I've had others that did very, very well. And then I just personally got bored with the work or no longer satisfied and kind of transitioned to something else. But by far, this point in my career has been the most rewarding and the most fun that I've had. But it is definitely not without its challenges, because you have to sacrifice a lot to do something like this.
Oh, I have no doubt. It's funny when people say they want to be their own boss and they want to have freedom. And so they do their own thing, create their own company, but they don't realize they actually work way more now than they used
Yeah,
to.
absolutely right.
It's funny how
So
that works.
if you are going to start your own business, if you're flying solo or you have a co-founder or even a small team in the beginning, regardless, if you are going to go the route of a startup, you will, or should anyway, if you want to be successful, work harder than you've ever worked in your life. You do not have a schedule. You work when work is needed, which in the beginning is all the time. So it's not uncommon for me to have calls that go until 10, 11 o'clock at night because I'm dealing with various time zones, not just one location. In some cases, when we're dealing with international clients, I have to set my alarm for 3 a.m., get up and do a call, and that's when my day starts. But you do what is necessary, and sometimes that means working on weekends and things like that. But again, it's thrilling, it's exciting, and when you overcome certain obstacles and reach certain milestones and you look back and you see, wow, like this started as a conversation, as an idea, and look where we've come, it's incredibly rewarding. But it's definitely a huge task. And I will say this for anyone who's listening and thinking about doing this, uh, go into it with your eyes, completely wide open. Understand you're not going to make money in the beginning. So make sure that personally, financially, that you have a way to sustain things. For me, that like with Vika Living, that means that I have to continue some of my consulting work on the side just to make sure that I have, a little bit of, ancillary income coming in to offset the loss that I took in salary, starting this, going from another career. If you are married, or in a serious relationship, this isn't a decision that you need to make alone. Let me warn people of that. Like, this is a team effort. Your family needs to be behind you and with you on this. Otherwise, it's not going to go very well at home. So, thankfully for me, my wife and my kids, like, they love Vika Living. Like, they're thrilled about it. They know all the ups and downs of it, but they've got my back 100%. And the people that I work with, they know my family. Like, they know that they've got people cheering for them. So that makes a huge difference. So I would say, be prepared to have setbacks, be prepared to fail. Don't be scared of that, but be determined to learn from it, grow from it, and move beyond it. Like, that's probably the more important thing. You're going to take your hits, you're going to have some failures, but don't be scared of that. Learn from it, get better from it, and just move beyond it. Leave that in the rear view.
No, you hit on so many great points there. I'm going to go to bringing up your family, because I love what you said about how it's not just your decision.
No.
And so that I'm a realtor and I have a few different projects that I'm working on. I left a normal 9 to 5 probably about 3, 4 years ago. And I jokingly but seriously call my husband my initial investor
Yeah.
because for him it's not just financial. Like, he's invested in like my energy, my time, my like sometimes just like I'll tell him, hey, I need you to hear me out so I can talk through a process or talk through an idea that I have. Like, clean it up. What do you think of it? Adjust it for me so that when I go and tell someone, like,
Yeah.
you just need that filter. And so I like that's another encouragement I would recommend to people listening is that, like, your spouse, your partner is kind of like an investor. They're pushing you, and so take care of them. Take
Yeah.
really good care of them because they have to do without you sometimes, and have to kind of pick up when you aren't there. I know my husband's helped a lot when I mean on weekends. Obviously, open houses is a big thing. So when I'm out
Sure.
on weekends, he has our 2-year-old, and for him, being with a 2-year-old who wants her mom all the time,
Yeah.
it can be a struggle for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I say you go into it with your eyes open, realistic expectations for everybody involved, not just you. Like I said, if you have a family, they need to be aware of what this is. And if you are going to start something from scratch, selling real estate in general is a little bit different because you can, get some traction early and sell things early. And so you have that pay coming in.
Mhm.
But if you're starting a company where you don't have that immediate payoff, then yeah, you may have to do without quite a few things, for a few years. And so you have to ask yourself the question in the beginning, do you believe in what you're doing?
Mm,
Because if you don't believe in it, then you shouldn't be doing it. It's not just a question of do you think it would be successful? You need to also believe in it and want to see this, out in the world. And that way, if that's the case, then your passion for it will naturally be conveyed and it'll help keep you going. It'll help keep all the people involved going. So I think those are really important conversations and a thought process that you have to go through early on. And then when you hit the roadblocks along the way, you just kind of remind yourself of that. And it's good to kind of create a habit of, however often you need, take a moment to just breathe, just be still, be quiet, just breathe, and just remember like everything's okay, it's all good, and remember like the joy that you're getting from the experience. All of a sudden you're revitalized and, bam, you're off to the races again.
no, I love that. Tell me one or two of the biggest lessons you've learned since starting Vika in this process of creating this company. What would you say are some of the biggest lessons?
Yeah, so for this startup, this is the first time I have started a company that was not privately funded, either by myself or just, a business partner that was, essentially a silent partner but funding something. This is a venture-backed company. So Scott and I both had, kind of our raising money from venture capitalists. That is, and it's a fun experience. It can be a nerve-wracking experience, but thankfully we closed our round of pre-seed funding early and have some incredible investors that just love what we're doing and they're incredibly supportive. But yeah, we'll probably do one more round of funding later this fall at our next round, and then we'll probably be done after that because we have the ability to live off of the revenue that we're creating with early sales, thankfully. But a lot of lessons learned as far as the venture capital world, what investors look for, in going into companies like this, valuations of companies and all sorts of things along those lines. The other thing is, and we kind of knew this going into it, but there has to be kind of a fluidity to some of the things that you're doing. You have to be adaptable to circumstances and environment. So the biggest thing that a lot of people, especially in manufacturing, are facing right now is, supply chain. We've heard that phrase used a million times in the last year and a half. We knew that could be a challenge going into it. So we spent extra time going through due diligence with vendors that we wanted to work with going into it. That was something that has paid off really well for us. So that was definitely a good lesson learned. It's don't be in such a hurry to start doing whatever it is you're doing. Like for us, building the unit, taking the time to research, lay the groundwork, set up the right relationships, doing those things. Because if you do it right the first time, then you won't have those stop downs and slow downs while you're actually producing. I think that was incredibly valuable for us.
No, I mean, it saved you. It saved you so much money over time to do that due diligence. So
Yeah,
I want to transition now to a segment I like to call the four W's. So I'm a
sure.
firm believer that we are what we watch, we are what we listen to, we are what we read, and we are who we hang out with. So for the first one, what are you watching? Do you watch a lot of TV? What kind of content do you take in visually?
Yeah, boy, you know, I don't have very much time to watch TV anymore. So what I'm watching right now, truthfully, would be nothing. Not a lot. I will say this summer, though, I did enjoy, like I said earlier, I'm originally from Dallas. That's my hometown. And I'm a huge Dallas Mavericks fan. And so I did watch all of their playoff games, which was a lot of fun for me. I make sure not to miss that. But outside of that, I haven't really watched anything lately other than some of the cartoons that my kids have seen, stuff like that. I've probably seen more kids shows than I have adult shows in the last several months. But yeah, I wouldn't even be able to tell you what shows are on now anymore. I'm really far behind.
No, oh no, and that's completely okay. It's funny. A few weeks ago, I had a friend on who also an entrepreneur, and I asked him that question. He was like, I maybe watch something on my iPad or my phone when I'm eating, but like I don't even have a TV at my house. And I've known this guy for like years. I'm like, man, I didn't know you didn't have a TV. But it's interesting. But I think when you're in this hustle, like you're not doing those things, right? Because it's not helping the business.
Yeah. I mean, when I'm not working, I'm just focusing on my family, and doing stuff with them. And so, yeah, our times together typically don't involve, the television,
Yeah.
which is completely fine. And my kids are 7 and 9 right now, and I don't want to miss, the amazing journey that they're on.
Absolutely. Well, so what next one is what are you listening to? Are you a big audiobook guy? Are you a podcast guy? What does that look like?
Yeah, actually, I'll be listening to your podcast now moving forward. So that'll be
Appreciate
on the
that.
list. Yeah, there's a few podcasts that I check out from time to time. Music is very big in our house, and the playlist is quite diverse. I mean, it's a lot of mornings. We have a couple of portable speakers that we'll have in various rooms and everything. And so very, very common in our kitchen, a lot of mornings to hear, I don't know the names of the artists. My wife creates a PlayStation or a playlist that's something about French cooking music. It sounds like you're in a French bistro, and it is so peaceful. And so it like really sets a happy mood for the day. We hear that a lot in the morning. This week, let me just think through this. This week, I have listened to everything from, let's see, in country music, George Strait to, Ryan Bingham and some of the people like that, to listening to the Eagles, to Tom Petty, to in the evenings listening to Natalie Cole and some of the people in that genre. So yeah, it's quite diverse. But music is always in my house, and I think that's partly because my wife is a brilliant singer, and so yeah, it's music's big for us.
Yeah, so it sets the mood. Well, so what are you reading? Do you read a lot?
I do read a lot. I think I lost track. My wife says I read about 100 books a year.
Really?
And yeah, and it's probably somewhere in that ballpark. I really don't know. I just finished, so the most recent thing, I just finished a novel by Daniel Silva, who is one of my favorite authors. And that was a really fascinating story that it was like a unique combination of like classic art, like the greats like Rembrandt and things like that, and Picasso and things like that, intertwining stories that have to do with the art world to, of all things, like espionage and even a little bit of politics. It sounds like a really odd combination, but it was so beautifully woven and a real page turner. I just finished that one.
Do you do any audiobooks or is it all
I
on
haven't done audiobooks yet, but I've got a feeling I probably will start incorporating some audiobooks and more podcasts just into like a workout routine. So I've got something other than music to listen to, while working out.
That's impressive that you manually read 100 books a year. So my goal every year is 25. But I've been doing audiobooks. So like and it helps because when I drive a lot and I just turn an audiobook on. That's impressive.
Yeah, for
Um,
me, I read every night before going to bed. That's just part of my routine. It kind of helps me quiet the day, all of the work stuff, because that's the other thing. I mean, you've got to stay healthy and focused, to be able to do, the various things that we have to do in these roles. And for me, outside of having family time, what that means when it's all quiet and everyone's going to sleep, I read, and I'll read for entertainment, versus reading something for work, to just kind of quiet everything down, get my head in a peaceful spot and go to sleep. So I think because I'm in that routine of reading every day, I just end up accumulating a lot of books.
no, I love that. Well, so before we end, usually the last question I like to ask is what I know you've already given some encouragement towards people that may want to make that leap into an entrepreneurial lifestyle or start their own business, but are there any other little nuggets or words of wisdom you can share?
Yeah, I would say, hold on to the things that ground you in life. And so for some people, it's your faith. For some people, it's their significant other, or working at a charity, volunteering, things like that. Whatever it is that you feel like anchors you in a very positive way, definitely hold on to that and nurture it. Like pour into that, and don't ever let that, don't ignore that. If you're someone that really gets centered and focused and feels, peace and calm by, going on a morning run or something, don't abandon that. Keep those things healthy and alive, regardless of what's happening in your work circumstances. The other end of the spectrum, like just kind of thinking through it, from a fiscal point of view, if you're going to go into a startup, make sure you are fiscally responsible, that you understand that you are going without a paycheck for a period of time. And I think it's wise to kind of define a cutoff, like if we don't start, bringing in income by, X date, then we're going to have to gracefully walk away. And a lot of the investors that we have met, it's interesting to hear them talk about having a wise exit strategy. And you don't expect to hear that from an investor, but they also want to protect the health of the people that are involved. But if you go into it, hoping for the best, you're prepared for the worst, but you give it everything that you've got and you stay grounded in a healthy way, and you've got a support system, you've got as good a chance as anybody to succeed. But again, you have to believe in what you're doing, and whatever it is that you're creating or whatever service you are providing, it has to be something that if you yourself were not doing it, you would want somebody else doing it, meaning you really think it needs to be, in our lives, in this world and everything, and be passionate about it and just be kind and supportive and thoughtful with the people that you work with. And for me, that's one of the most encouraging things about my career, whether it's, as a startup founder or part of a much larger team and employed by someone. I love working with really smart and capable and passionate people and pulling together as a team to kind of excel and achieve beyond the goals. Like that's always the stance that I take. And that creates a real camaraderie, amongst the people that you're working with. And for me, and I know a lot of the people that I work with, that also makes a huge difference, because then you're never alone, in the process. So regardless of, you may have the title of founder or you may have the title of assistant, to whatever, you all need to be, pulling together and cheering for each other.
Oh, absolutely. And it creates, I mean, like you said, it creates for an amazing environment when all of those people come together. Because you can tell, especially coming from when I was in hotels, you can go into a place and tell if people like working with each other or not. And it affects the atmosphere, not just for the employees, but for the customers as well. And so it's always nice to
Oh,
when you can tell, man, this team really,
yeah,
not only do they enjoy working with each other, but because of that, they're really good at what they're doing.
absolutely. There is no part of the business or even the customer experience that is not radically improved by having a solid work culture and a fun environment. I mean, you get the work done, you have to, you can't survive without it, but there's nothing that says you can't enjoy it along the way and enjoy each other and do all of that. It makes such a big difference.
Oh, absolutely. Well, so tell us where can people find you?
Sure. So I would say check out our website, vikaliving.com. So that's VIKA living.com. And you can see more about the unit. We've got contact information on there. If you want to reach out to me directly, that's completely fine. You can email me. It's jeff@vikaliving.com. And yeah, we're happy to talk to anybody. And also, I would say this, if you are someone who is thinking about starting a business and you just want to have a quick chat about that, I'm happy to help. I'd mentioned before, I do consulting work for people. It's also part of kind of my daily routine. And recently I started advising two other companies where I spend about an hour a week helping them out. And that's another piece of advice I would give to somebody. Have people to talk to, you know, never be afraid to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you in, all these areas, and who know, like, you got to kind of leave your ego aside. And if you can lean into somebody else's experiences, even if it's just in one particular category, I highly encourage it. We all need to help each other and be there for each other. Otherwise we're not going to have these fabulous, opportunities and incredible businesses that literally can change the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All top performers or great leaders in whatever industry you want to name have mentors,
Yes,
coaches. So yes, I am all for that. If you want advice, reach out to people who are doing it. So I
that's
think that's
right.
a great touch, and thank you for opening that door.
Yeah, and I'm very fortunate to be part of a couple of founders communities, people that are in, early stage companies like myself, have developed some incredible friendships and relationships, and it's common in every industry. I mean, we are building something really cool, as our business in Vika One, but I know a lot of people who are in software and tech and healthcare and things like that in the startup. And all founders experience the same anxieties, the same fears, the same exhilaration. Like that's not unique to industry. So it helps to talk to other people who have been there and done that, and it helps to talk to people who are currently, in that situation and learn from what works and what doesn't work.
Oh, no, definitely. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time and thank you for all the words of wisdom and sharing your story. I really appreciate it. And I hope that whoever's listening takes some really, really great or has some great takeaways from this and implements them. So thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Happy to help. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Have a good day.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.